We're joined today by Drew Anderson. Drew played for the Brewers a number of years ago, and now he serves as a regional supervisor in scouting. Drew, we're thrilled to have you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
I wanted to start out with this because I was talking with someone a couple days ago about how we were having someone from the Brewers scouting department on, and this person, that was my mom, she was asking me what was going on with the pod, and she asked me, she's like, what does a scout do in January? And I didn't really have an answer to it, so I wanted to ask you, because other people are probably wondering if she is, what does your day look like in January when there obviously aren't games outside, at least not in the central region where you're located?
Yeah, I mean, January is kind of your time to prepare for the upcoming season. A lot of the area scouts are working on putting in all the schedules for all the players for the upcoming season so that once we get going, you're looking at like possible runs. You're trying to organize your spring so that you are using your time as efficiently as possible. And then you're also kind of like trying to clean up. We all do pref lists, so we have lists of all the players in our region. So you're trying to kind of look at that, try and work off of that. Usually work top down. So you're trying to kind of plan out your schedule, make sure your list is in order, and then we actually have meetings. We actually have meetings next week. We have a 3-day window of meetings to kind of just prepare and get ready and just have everything in order for once the season starts kicking off here. Because, I mean, some of the states it never stops. So, like, I mean, they're playing baseball. I mean, they're starting in California, Florida, Texas. So they're rolling down there. I know the D1s are just getting back, but there's always something to see. So we're trying to just stay on top of that, and then also just try and make sure that we're all on the same page and try and get some of these early names out there. We'll run through some of the top guys and just kind of get their names out there so that we can kind of see what kind of progress they've make throughout the spring. So it's kind of, you get to be home, which is really nice in January. So I think that's the good part about January for being a scout, because you know in February things are about to start getting crazy for you for the next 4 or 5 months. So I think a lot of it is you're recovering and then just kind of preparing for the upcoming season.
And Drew, talk a little bit about and just kind of go through your resume a little bit. I know you had the privilege of playing with me, right? So we kind of came up together and went through the minor league system together. You got a chance to play in the big leagues as well with the Brewers. Just kind of go over what your path was to get here.
Yeah, mine was a little bit more unconventional than most, just because I'm from Nebraska. We didn't have high school baseball, so I actually played football, basketball, ran track during the baseball season because we didn't have it, and then did summer Legion ball for baseball. Had the opportunity to get recruited to play a couple different sports in college, and ultimately had the option when I went to Nebraska. I could have played football or track or baseball, and I decided that baseball was by far the best option for me physically and mentally to survive the rest of my life after seeing how big some of those football players were. So chose baseball, went to the University of Nebraska, was very fortunate to join them at a time when the program really took off. So I was lucky enough to go to the College World Series 2 of the 3 years I was there. And it was the first time Nebraska had ever been to the College World Series, so that was awesome. So then went from that path, and then I did really well in the summers and kind of got my name out there that way. And then after my junior year, was fortunate enough to get drafted by the Brewers, which well, the funny part is Harvey Keene was the one who drafted me. He also drafted Vinny. So, I mean, shout out to Harvey. He obviously can scout, legit talent, especially later in the draft by getting me and Vinny, guys that both luckily made it somehow to the big leagues. So, and then obviously grinded through the minor leagues, was fortunate enough to make it to the big leagues, and then kind of got to the end of my career where I kind of had to make a decision. I'm like, do I want to keep doing this? Vinny decided to keep grinding because he's the ultimate grinder, and I felt like I'm just kind of don't know if I can handle this anymore, and actually asked our hitting coach, who's now a bench coach for us in the big leagues, what I should do, because I don't know anything else. I've done baseball my whole life, and he's like, you know what, you should go into scouting. He goes, everything revolves around scouting. Having that knowledge, you can go into college baseball, you can go into the PD side. There's just so many things that scouting that you need as a background. So I was like, all right, sounds good. I actually set up a meeting with our assistant GM Gord Ash. He kind of laid out how it worked, and then I did my interview for this job in between batting practice and the game. So it was a little unconventional in that way. And then basically, like, I knew I was retiring, so once the season ended, I ended up going to scout school like the next month, and kind of learned that way, like, because there is no manual for this job. I think that's the thing when people are trying to get into it. It's like there's no like introduction to scouting. Like, you basically learn it on the fly. So scout school definitely gave me a good basis. Did the scout school, and then they kind of carved an area for me. They didn't like hire or fire anyone differently. They just added me. So like I kind of had a made up region to kind of start. I mean, I was like Minnesota, the Dakotas, Nebraska, and Kansas. So, and I lived in Minnesota at the time. So it was like a really random area, but they gave me the opportunity to kind of see other players throughout the country to kind of build my scouting knowledge. So did that for a while, then slowly started adding states. Got Iowa, because I was like, guys, I'm driving through Iowa like 90% of the time. Can I at least get the state? So they gave me that. And then I added Missouri, and then started moving into that. And then after 8-9 years, I got the opportunity to move to this role as supervisor, and started with the Midwest, basically like Minnesota down to Texas. And now I've expanded on even more, and I have like the Four Corners, and I have Tennessee, Ohio, over all the way to Michigan. So pretty large area now with 5 people underneath me. So it's been really good. The Brewers have been awesome to me since I've been drafted. So nothing but great things from the organization, and they've kind of like given me a ton of different opportunities, whether it was in the minor leagues when I needed a job, and then into the scouting world. So it's been a really good fit, and I'm loving it. So I'm still learning every day. That's the best part about this job. Like there's no end game. Like you get better every day. Like, I mean, it's really, really hard job. So you're never going to be 100%. You're just hoping to be like 20%. Because if you can get those 1 or 2 guys that change the organization, like, then you're winning. So it's kind of the path I've went to up to this point.
Yeah, we want to get into some of those names because I know that you have made an impact on the organization with some of the guys that you were able to help acquire, whether it was you drafted them as an area guy or now as a supervisor. But back in the day, it was called a crosschecker, right? So what does that mean for people?
So basically, there's the first level is the area scout. He is the one that's kind of beating the bushes, going around. He has a territory, kind of like when I started, like Minnesota, the Dakotas, Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa. So you're going into those states trying to find and identify players. And when you find a player that you feel like is worthy, or that kind of like gives you that itch that like, hey man, I think this guy's a player, then you recommend him to the next level, which would be me. So then I would come in and see that player and kind of determine if there needs to be action for another level. Like we have another level above me, which would be like the national crosschecker. We have 2 of those guys that will come in and see him, and then the director. So the director is the one where, I mean, his time is valuable. So you're trying to send him to the best guys that you think are most suited. He's usually going to go look at like the top 2 round picks. That's probably that's more of his consensus. But if he's in the area, he'll go see some of the other level guys. But he's coming in to see, like, hey, I mean, our first pick is the one that matters. Our comp pick, like those high dollar picks are the ones that have the most money invested. So you're trying to push them up the pipeline. So basically my job is to coordinate all of my area scouts and then try and get them in position to make sure that they're seeing the best players, trying to get their opinions on how confident they are on those players, so that we're making sure that we're covered when it gets closer to the draft, so we don't have any mini surprises. So mainly the area scout does a lot of the dirty work, and then they call and I come in and try and see as many of their players that they like as possible. And obviously it's a short season, so it gets tough. And I mean, I think the hardest part is trying to make everyone happy, because everyone wants you to see all their players. So like, you're like, man, I can't get to that one. Like I get calls daily. It's like, hey, can you come here? Can you come tomorrow? I got this guy. I'm like, I'm trying, I'm going. Now I'm in Tennessee, but I'm going to try to get to that guy. So like trying to get to as many looks as you can. But the video aspect has been huge too now. So we push to go more high school, college, less college, more high school, junior college, where we have less information. So I do a lot more video analysis on those guys, the college D1 levels, just because we have so much information. And I'm going to go see a lot more of the high school, junior college players that we don't have as much information on.
Yeah, that's where it definitely has changed. Before we get into some of the specifics on that, I wanted one more aspect of your job and how you got into it, and why it sounds like you love scouting. I love scouting as well when I was a pro scout for the Texas Rangers. It's a fascinating job, but talk a little bit about your personal experience at Nebraska, because I remember you played for Van Horn, and he's not an easy guy to play for. I'll never forget kind of your path to not only the big leagues, but it's probably influenced your path in the job that you do now, and why you're so good at it and why you're so passionate about it, why you love it so much, because you played for a guy. It wasn't necessarily a great fit for you in college just in terms of playing time. We talk about how important finding a great fit is for players here at Prep Baseball all the time. But you grinded your way into summer ball, and that's when Harvey Keene, you mentioned how good of a scout he was, why Harvey Keene then was able to identify you in summer ball, and just a great job that he did. And did that influence you? Just kind of go through that whole process, your college experience, summer ball experience, and then if maybe Harvey Keene did have a really good influence on you into becoming the scout you are today.
Yeah. I mean, I had a very unique path to pro ball itself. I mean, like, I think the biggest thing, that the difference that I tell kids, especially when I meet with them, I mean, having that experience is like I know that we all we want, like, you just assume the best player is the one that always ends up like becoming like a major leaguer or whatever. But the reality is, sometimes when I got there to Nebraska, we were really good, and college is about winning. So like, if you don't play well, it doesn't matter. Like, I could be the most athletic or the best talented player on the team. I'm not playing. And the reality is, by my junior year, when I got drafted, I hit 238. And I was a backup. I came in and played defense for a left fielder who was raking. So, like, I mean, I wasn't even a full-time starter in college my junior year, the year I got drafted. And it wasn't because I wasn't a good player. And I didn't change a single thing when I went to pro ball. But the difference was, the pressure of college was, I had a coach that, I mean, he's a winner. He's won at every level. I mean, the reason that they built a statue for him in Arkansas, I mean, the guy wins. But at the same time, I would get pulled mid-game. Like, I mean, I had a lot of talent, but I mean, I'd be 0 for 1, I'd get pulled. So, like, I was playing, and that is just not my personality. Like, everyone kind of has different ways that they like to be coached, and, like, you yell at me and yell at me, get on me. It didn't work for me, and the first day when I actually got to pro ball and in summer ball, why I thrived was, like, it was a positive environment. Like, there was no, like, I could go for 3 and I'd be like, all right, I'm going to play tomorrow. And it just kind of took the pressure off. So, like, in college, as soon as I got there, always felt like there was just this weight on my shoulders. Like, I was always told, like, you're so athletic. When are you ever going to turn it on? It just felt like I was letting people down. And it was just so much of a burden that I didn't play well. Like, I mean, I didn't do anything differently when I got to pro ball. I mean, I hit 300 in pro ball for 8 years, and I hit 230 in college. And I mean, that makes no sense. This is juice bat days. This isn't this isn't the BB core. Like, there's no reason, and I could hit, like, there's a reason I shouldn't have hit in college, but it was 100% just the fact that the coaching philosophy was really difficult, and it didn't fit my playing style. So I think the thing that it's guided me in my job now is, like, I'm not necessarily looking for performance. You're looking for tools. Like, tools are what play in the major leagues. Like, your tool set and your athleticism can only take you so far. Like, there are good players that make it to the big leagues that are, like, excellent baseball players, and they're grinders and they know the game. But those are the high floor guys that maybe, get a day or two. But, like, the ones that make it, the Trouts and all, I mean, you have to have a certain level of athleticism. If you don't have that, you're not going to be a superstar. The superstars all have plus tools of some nature. So, like, so sometimes you go to those games and you're looking at the guy on the bench and you're like, man, that guy is so gifted. And I mean, that happens sometimes, especially with these arms, where, I mean, there's a lot of examples of guys that went out that didn't pitch in college that are, like, major league dudes. I mean, Blake Trinan was at South Dakota State. I had him my second year. You know, like he got drafted as a junior for like $5,000. They banged his medical because he threw like 3 days before in Alaska, and they said that his shoulder was messed up, and it was nothing wrong. He just pitched a complete game the day before. But he was like 91, 93, had to go back as a senior sign, and he was like 94, 96, but like his stats were not good. He had like a 5 at South Dakota State. But I mean, you looked at him and it was like, this dude's 6'5". He doesn't know what he's doing. He was throwing a breaking ball that had so much depth and spin. The kids didn't swing. So, like, you're like, well, why does he not get people up? I'm like, because they can't swing his breaking ball. It's too big. Like, he couldn't throw it for a strike. They got to pro ball. They shortened everything up, and now everything moves like like he's throwing wiffle balls, you know? Yeah. He didn't change anything. He was that good in college, and he had a 5 at South Dakota State. That's why he was like a senior sign, you know, for like, I think he signed for like $10,000 or something like that in the 8th round. Wow. Whatever it was, $70,000. I mean, it was nothing. So, like, but when you went and watched him, you watch him now, you'd be like, oh, I get it. Like, you never went and saw him like, oh, this guy, he got so much better. No, he didn't. He was really good then. He just didn't have the tool set to get people out at the time. So I think that's something that I'm more looking for that, I mean, I'm not going to rule out. Like, and the college performer is great. And I think that's sometimes what the teams have pushed for at times. I think we're getting back away from that, where athleticism is starting to take over more. But there's some absolutes. But, I mean, that's why you got to dig sometimes. I mean, if you find that guy that you think, hey, man, this guy's got a lot of athleticism, I'm sticking with him, you know. There's always something there. Those are the ones that you can find that, like, the Corey Harts in the 12th round that can change your organization. So, like, you need to look for those guys because the reality is the first rounders are first rounders. Like, I mean, those are easy. You're going to go to a game. My mom, your mom, everyone can identify a first rounder most of the time when you go to the game. Who's the best player? Well, that guy is. Yeah, he went 1-1, you know? And that was funny when I got into the pro scape, when I went back and our manager, Don Money, after my first year of scouting, I went back in one of the managers I had for 4 years, and he was in Lowe and Appleton at the time. And we were just talking about scouting, and he's like, well, what about that guy? I'm like, Don, that's Byron Buxton. He went 1-1. You know, like, we all know about him. We can't draft him, you know? And he would be like, well, what about this guy? I'm like, well, that guy's an undrafted free agent. Like, if at that point, if you threw 92 and threw a strike, you're getting drafted. Now it's like you throw 97, you have to have a secondary. So things have changed. But it's like there's scales of it, you know? So it's like they're all like, well, why did we not draft that guy? I'm like, well, we couldn't because he went way higher than our pick. So I think people don't understand the grasp of the level of talent. I mean, you can go weeks without seeing a player that you would recommend for the draft. So, I mean, it's a fun job. It's a challenging job at the same time. And and what's the best part about it is I can go to a game and I can be like, man, I think that guy is a dude. He's a big leaguer. Vinny can go to that exact same game, sit right next to me and think that guy's terrible. And so it's all opinions. So, like, I mean, there's no absolute, and we don't know for 5 years who's right or wrong. So I think that's the part that your instincts, your gut, all of those things can separate organizations, and the good ones do a good job of doing both, you know, taking the scouts' point of view and also, you know, looking at the stats and the analytic part of the view as well.
So, Drew, Josh, do you want to ask Drew? We talked.
Yeah,
about,
I can jump in on that.
Yeah.
You were talking about how your individual process is, and you've been doing this for so long. Like, how has your individual process for like just scouting and identifying process evolved over the years?
I think the biggest thing is I always try and use like the Rolodex of players. Like you try and look at your failures. Like I always try and look back at drafts and be like, what did I miss there? You know, like I think my biggest thing is I always looked for tools. Like from the day one, it was always like tools, like athleticism. And then I started to learn like, that's great. But if you don't make a lot of contact, it's really hard to teach someone. I don't care how gifted you are to make contact. So like you start to look back like, all right, so now I need to find tools with guys that have some feel for the zone, that don't swing and miss a ton, because that's something, no matter how athletic you are, it's really hard to teach. Like I can't just like, oh yeah, don't worry, he's an 80 athlete, he's going to go into pro ball and he's going to hit. It doesn't happen. And those are the ones that you'll see, like those big misses on some of those guys where you're like, man, if he could just hit, if he could just make contact, but it's really hard. So I think you you always are drawing on the things, and I always try and look at the things that some of the absolutes or the misses, like trying to go with percentages. So like the thing that I was always light on was like guys who didn't have huge stuff but struck out a ton of guys. And then I started looking back and I'm like, you know what? The guy in my area that was left-handed that struck out, that had a high amount of strikeouts, and there was like 4 of them in my area in the last. If you go like through a 10-year span, they led the country in strikeouts. They could spin it. They didn't have necessarily plus stuff. They were all big leaguers. So if you miss bats, you could spin it and you're left-handed. Like, I'm going to focus more on that now. Like, like you learn from those mistakes. Like there was a guy, Matt Hall at Missouri State. I'm like, I just don't see it. It's like 88, like but he led the country in strikeouts in Missouri State. He's throwing 89, pitched up in the zone. It was before the analytics, but I'm sure it was, low release plus extension, ride through the top of the zone with a 12-6 curveball at the top of it. And he just got people to swing and miss. Dude made it to the big leagues as a senior sign. It's like, those guys make it. Matt Strom, like I know he throws harder now. Matt Strom, I loved him at Neosho. He was 86. He never threw a pitch above 90 when I saw him. Wow. But he led the country in strikeouts. He spun the crap out of it. He had a really good curveball. He was long, he was lanky, it was projectable, but it was 86, 87 when he got there, 88, 89, 90 when he got drafted. And then all of a sudden, he was like 98 before he had TJ. After TJ, and then now he's obviously like learned to manipulate the baseball, but it's upper 90s when he wanted it. And that dude's had a great career. But again, struck out a ton of dudes and he could spin it. And then Aaron Ashby, same thing. Like Ashby was like 89, 90 when I first saw him, ton of strikeouts, really spin it. And even when we drafted him, I think the hardest I ever saw him throw was like 95, like touch it. And he's been 98, 99, like sitting it. You don't look at Ashby and think, oh, this is a projectable body. He's going to get, he just got better. But he, what he could do? He could spin it from the very beginning. So like those types of things you try to draw back on. And a lot of it is just your mistakes or the guys you missed on. Like I look back and I'm like, how did I miss on this guy? What was I light on, So I think that's what has made me a better scout is being willing to accept like what my misses were and trying to correct them. Because if I continue to just keep going on the same path, I'd be keep drafting guys that are going to probably ultimately fail, So like you're trying to find that fine line of sticking with what you believe and what you trust, but also like, all right, I know that this is a really small minority that I'm playing in right now. So let's try and stay away from it. Kind of like the high school catcher, like the odds are really tough. The high school right-handed pitcher in the first round. Like, yeah, you see guys like, gosh, now I'm blanking on the dude's name, but he was 3rd, 4th pick with the Rockies from Kansas City.
Pint.
Yeah, Pint. You know what I'm saying? Like, you go watch that guy. It was the best stuff you've ever seen in your life. He's throwing 101 in a bullpen in January in high school, and you're like, I don't even know where you go with this. It was 4 7s, and you're like, this is the easiest pick in the world. And if you look, he hasn't even been hurt. It's just a hard path for high school righties in that first round. And so I think I instantly I pass on the high school kid if he's a first rounder. If he's going to go in the first, like I'll go to the bat. Like you're just trying to learn. Like, and I would never do. Like normally at the beginning, I'm like, dude, take this guy. Like Pint, I'm like, he was one on my list. Let's go. Like let's do this. Like this is all 8s. Like why would you not? This is a number 1. But then you look at the odds of it are so low. You're just like, all right, let's not play in that pool. So I think you learn where you want to push your chips and where you want to hold off on, but you still have those guys, man, where you see a guy and you're like, I love him, you go with it. Because that was kind of Ashby for me. Like the first time I saw him, he walked 8 guys in a row in his first college outing, and I'm like, I love this dude. Like I walked out like I'm all in. Like there's just something about some guys where you just you're in, and you just got to just stick with that gut feeling. So, and Trinan was that thing. I saw Trinan, and I was like, I wish that was my first year scouting. I wish I would have known what I know now. I would have went all in on it because everything I read my reports, I'm like, dude, you nailed it. But I was like, I don't know where he goes. Like you don't know where to put him. I had him in the 3rd, but I didn't fight for him. Like now, I'd be like, dude, guys, we got now take him. 2nd, now take him. So you learn from those mistakes. So I think that's how you get better in this job.
And it's interesting you talk about in the high school righty in the first round.
Yeah, well, I'm just curious with the rule changes, obviously they're always changing. People are talking a lot about NIL stuff, but I mean we're seeing college guys get paid six figures to go play college baseball. Has that changed the landscape at all, where now you're not even just competing within your bonus pool to sign players, but you're also maybe competing against some of the big college programs that might have bigger budgets than an entire signing pool?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely changed the landscape. And again, it's like one of those things you're going to have to adapt to, because it is a definite factor. I mean, you're looking at the ability now for these juniors, college juniors, where usually the leverage was you can sign as a junior and actually get some money. As a senior, you don't have any leverage because you're going to go back. So that's where, like, me and Vinny, we sign, like Vinny signs after the draft, and you're signing for $500. Like, these kids now are able to go back after the junior year. And there was a case this year where a player turned down, I think, $1 million to go back, but the school that he went back to offered him $1 million. So why would you not take that? Like, I look at it as a kid, I'm like, dude, I get what he's talking about. Like, take that, and then you can have a chance to get drafted again. Like, that was never, ever an option before. So when teams have the ability, or colleges have the ability to do that, that makes it really hard on us. So, like, I think it's making us learn and try and work on our relationships even more to just know what that kid wants to do. Because at the end of the day, like, money is a factor for sure, but a lot of the kids that end up signing out of high school, or even the college kids, like, their path is they want to be a major leaguer. They want to play professional baseball. And there's guys that turn down the opportunity to make more money in college. And one of them, hopefully, is a big leaguer for us this season, is Craig Yoho. Like, he signed for less with us because he wanted to play pro ball. He could have went back to Arkansas. He was going to go to Arkansas the next year and make a lot more money than we gave him, but he wanted to be a big leaguer. And he knew it was time. He was old. He was older. He needed to get his. So, like, he chose that path. And I mean, I think as long as he stays on the path, he made a great choice. Like, he's got a chance. He's knocking on the doorstep of the big leagues right now. So, like, that matters too. Like, you got to get to know that kid. And our area scout, Ginger Paulson, did a great job with him, knowing that he really wanted to play. And she kept saying, like, you really think he's going to sign? Like, we know he's going to. She's like, he's playing. And he did. And he was pumped. And he's went out and done exactly, having zero doubts in his mind definitely helped him. So I think the NIL thing is going to be a massive, massive factor going forward, especially as these resources continue to improve. And then also the JUCO rules as they change and all these things evolve. It's just constantly, there's always something coming into play that you have to learn about.
Do you think that might also change the players that you target? Like, is there a chance that you might target more like high upside guys that maybe aren't as much of present performers in college?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely going to change where we go, and I think we kind of learned that this year, and we're trying to continue to work on the best ways to approach the player pools, because now you just don't have as much ability to sign a kid, especially on day 3, that you did before, because the school can offer them, they can match whatever you're going to give them, So, like, that just makes it a lot more hard, where they didn't have that before. It was like, yeah, you give a kid $400,000. He's like, that sounds great, and that may be what they want. But now the school can jump in and say, oh, what'd they offer you? Well, we'll give you this too, and match it. So, like, obviously the kid, if I'm the kid, I'm taking the college and the money, and then with the opportunity to do it again as a guarantee. So I think that is going to make it a little bit more challenging. But at the same time, I think there's enough kids that want to play pro ball that's their goal, and the money isn't as important. I mean, like, look at Cooper Pratt, a guy for us that I think we signed him in the 3rd or 4th round. Like, we knew he wanted to play, and I mean, and I think other teams were scared that the money was way higher. And I mean, he did get paid well, but we knew he wanted to play, and our area scout doing a great job. So I think if you know where that kid's at, that makes a huge difference, and that relationship's going to be really important. So I think that it's just going to dig more into the relationship piece and less of just, you can't just pull names out anymore, because kids will be like, I'm not signing, and you're going to lose picks that way. So I think the scouts are going to have to do a lot better job now than ever before with communication and knowing the players that we're taking, not only just high school, but college, which you didn't have to do before. I mean, college kids, you're like, oh man, he's signing. He's a junior, or he's a senior. Now it's like these kids are like, I can go back for $100,000, as a senior. So there's kids that turn you down when you call them because they have more money at college, which is insane, which is something you've never ever had to deal with. So I think it's definitely a hurdle, but something that, I mean, you just evolve with each year as new things, as you learn new things about it.
Drew, what about the prep players though? Like the guys that, okay, I don't know if I want to sign, or I don't know if I want to go to Arkansas anymore or wherever. I think I want to sign because you just, and again, we talk all the time to players about finding that great fit so you can develop at the next level. But now all of a sudden, a really highly touted prospect that has a chance to get drafted, and you guys are all over them. It's like, okay, I'm not going to Kentucky now or Florida State because you know what? I'm going to have a better chance to develop at the pro level than at the college level. There's 4 shortstops ahead of me that are, upperclassmen. So talk about, is that a strategic target for guys? And then you guys are saving money in the draft. Kind of just talk about that whole process about saving money, and that you guys have done a great job of that, of finding prep players on day 2 and 3 of the draft. Cooper Pratt's a great example.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think the big part with that is just like you're trying to provide information because you know that the colleges are giving them the information on why they should come to school, and then on all we're trying to do is give them as much information as you can, because I think the number one thing when I walk in is like I want them to do what's best for them. Like I want the player to do whatever their heart is at. Like I want to give you information, but if you choose to go to pro ball and you feel like you should be at Arkansas, you will fail 100%. Like if your heart is not where you're at, you are going to struggle. I tell the kids that every single time. So I'm like, if you feel like if you feel like you turn down an opportunity to go to the pro ball and you go to Arkansas, you will not survive at Arkansas either. Like you have to, wherever you got to go with where your heart is and take some of the other things out, because wherever that is at, that's what's going to guide you. You know what I'm saying? So I think the big part now is kind of just giving them the information, because I think it's going to be extremely difficult for a true freshman to play at any Division I school in the country from now on. With these new rules, with these kids coming back and like the JUCO stuff and the age moving up and coaching wanting to win, like if you were to kind of take a snapshot and just a broad overview of college baseball, how many true freshmen throw more than 10 innings a year? I mean, I'm going to tell you the percentage is very, very low. And how many get more than 50 at-bats? Like not very many. So like the opportunity to play pro ball now, I think is even more enticing, because you go out now, you're going to get 200 at-bats your first year in pro ball. I mean, it's almost like a JUCO scenario when you used to be back in the day. Do I want to go D1 or JUCO and ride the bench and not play? Or do I get 250 at-bats and then go the next year to the Division I school? So I think it's the same thing where pro ball gives you that ability, where college, it's tough, man. Like, I mean, I look at all these schools. I mean, I can't name you an impact freshman that was like a key player in the Midwest. It's hard because they're older kids, and those kids are they're transferring in now. There's no restrictions. So, I mean, you may think you're going to, we'll just say a school like, UW, Wisconsin. You think you're going there and you know what the roster looks like with the transfer portal. You could have 15 kids come in that you had no idea or you couldn't account for, that are all juniors and seniors. And 3 of them could play your position. So now you're in trouble. I mean, you're a freshman at 18 coming in playing against a 23-year-old. You may be more talented, but I guarantee you winning is more important in college than it is in professional baseball. So that 23-year-old's playing over the 18-year-old. They don't have time to develop you like you do in professional baseball. So I think it's going to actually push more prep players to seeing the opportunity to, like, all right, like this may be my best development path, would be to sign now and get at bats and have the ability to have more hands-on development that you're just not going to get at college, because it's going to be a way more sophomore, junior, senior, graduate, led programs, because it's about winning at the end of the day. I mean, you can say what you want, but if you don't win at a Power 5 or one of those schools, you're gone. So, and nobody's winning with freshmen. It's not like basketball. You roll in five high school freshmen and you can win. It ain't happening in college baseball. So, I think the transfer portal makes a huge impact on the ability for kids that think that they're told they're going to go in and play. But I'm like, I promise you, dude, there's 5 guys at the same spot as you that are all coming back that were in your shoes that it's just not going to happen. And then they'll reach out, man, you were right. I'm like, I know, I'm sorry. Like, I know, so I think that part of it definitely impacts and is going to kind of change the landscape of amateur kids maybe choosing even later rounds to sign and say, hey, this is where my best ability to get better and develop is the pro route.
Is there a specific player that either you as an area scout or as a cross-checker have drafted who was a high school player and then was able to develop maybe a little bit slowly throughout the minors but wound up making the majors?
Well, the weird part about like the Midwest too is hard where the one, like as far as me personally, like I only think I drafted 2 high school kids in my time, mainly because like when we were doing our system, I didn't have as many of a cross-checker role. We had a different dynamic to our scouting department. So like the first high school kid I got was Monte Harrison, who ended up being a 2nd-round pick that played in the big leagues. And he was, I mean, uber athlete. Again, like what I said, like I love athletes.
He's playing football now.
Yeah, he plays football for Arkansas. I mean, he don't get much more athletic than him. His brother's in the NBA. He's a freak show athlete. But, and I think the hardest part for him was just finding some consistency offensively with contact, like we talked about. When he had it, he was exceptional. And I mean, to his credit, he brought us Christian Yelich. So we definitely won that. We definitely benefited and won in that deal to get Christian Yelich in that trade. But I mean, he was that highly sought after at that time. I mean, he had just come off a great year. I know there was a lot of other players in that, but he was the driving factor in that trade to get Christian Yelich. And I think a lot of it was when he went to the other organization, he lost some of the footing that he had established with us as far as like the hitting coaches and the philosophies. And he kind of got to another organization that was doing a little bit different. He was changing a lot. And every time I saw him, I was like, dude, you're doing a different stance. So I think his problem was, again, like it's hard. Contact's tough and the pitching is hard. So if you don't have that foundation, athleticism can take you as far as it can, but eventually what pushed him out ultimately was just he couldn't do it enough on a consistent basis to get to the tools. So, but like that was one of those cases where it was like he just played baseball, he also played football, but I mean, you went and watched him, like, dude, I would love to take a chance on this guy. This guy could be a superstar, And it may not have panned out, but it did bring us Yelich. So there's still value in those types of guys. So, I mean, very similar to like the Lorenzo Cain story, because I played with Lorenzo. He was like that. Like, I mean, he didn't even play baseball until his junior in high school. So, like, and he developed slower. Like, I mean, he was a draft pick in the 11th round with the Brewers. I mean, I remember coming back into instructs, and he was there, and he couldn't hit out of the cage. Like, every ball was hit up in the air, and I'm like into the cage. I'm like, dude, who is this dude? And then he ran like a 6'2", 60, and I was like, okay, I mean, he can fly. He's athletic, but I'm like, he couldn't throw the ball from center field to second base in the air. And you're like, what is this? I saw him the next year, and you're like, okay, yeah, he's getting better. And it was gradual. And then I played with him in Double-A, and I'm like, man, this guy's got a chance to like be a good, like play in the big leagues, And then, he just won a World Series, Gold Glove, no big deal. Like, that's just how much better he continued to get. He just never stopped getting better. And the work ethic was there. Like, he had that. His X factor was he did not get credit for how much of a worker he was, man. Like, that guy grinded and got better and better and better. And those are what you're looking for within the kid too, as well. Like the athleticism can take you so far, but to find the work ethic, you don't know, like, we'll give Vinny a shout out, but like Vinny's work ethic was kind of unmatched to the other people. So Vinny's competing against other people where I was his roommate, where he was trying to teach himself how to catch. I tell other amateur players this. So he's trying to learn how to catch. He's never caught in his life. And every day in the hotel, he's stretching for like hours on end. Like, he has this little stopwatch. He's stretching. I'm like, what are you doing, dude? But like, he wanted to play in the big leagues. So like, you have to do things that others aren't willing to do. And if you can do that, you can pass the other people. So like, you're looking for the makeup plus the athleticism that gives you the star, So I think that's kind of like the basis of everything that you're going for.
How does it make like draft or scouting the densely populated areas, such as in the Great Lakes region in the Midwest, like much more important? Like Illinois had, I believe it was 10 or 11 high school players drafted this past year. Like, what's making like the cold weather states, like these pro organizations, more comfortable in drafting these players?
Yeah, I mean, I love the Midwest, and I think the reason that it's, I mean, having the ability now to I scout in Texas and the Four Corners and like kind of done other countries, is like the Midwest is unique to anywhere else in the country because your demographic is it's bigger. It's harder to find players because you have to travel. You have to be smarter in your resources with scheduling your time. Plus, the weather plays a massive factor. So, like, I can go see you, Josh, play, and say I go in April and it's 25 degrees. I'm not going to get a great look, and I'm trying to identify something there, which happens a ton. Is like, I want to go see something. You may be throwing 89. This happens a lot in the Midwest. So, like, early on in the season, you're coming out of the gym. You're also learning, like, these kids don't have the resources that the other kids have to play outside. So, like, maybe they've only played catch in the gym. So you go watch him. He comes out of the gate. He's like 89. Then in May, you go back, and he's throwing 95. And you're like, whoa, what's going on? Like, that doesn't happen in California. It doesn't happen in Florida. So, like, you have that happen all the time. Like, like Max Carlson, there's AJ Puck. Like, they're all these kids from these, you go see them and you're like, man, I like it. I mean, of all the people, like Gavin Lux, like, they're tough to see. So you're trying to scout those guys sometimes, like the high school hitter in the summer, and see if they can play against them, like, in the area code. So, like, where Jared Kelenic made his money was Team USA. Because he played on Team USA, you got to see him against the best players. So then when the summer came, or his spring of his draft year came, he plays in the PBR Spring League. So he is playing on Sunday mornings against players. You know, he faces a different pitcher every single time. That's a tough scenario as a hitter. Like, you have no ability to get into routine. You can't develop anything like, all right, this is how he got me out first time. Like, he's facing a different pitcher every time early in the morning on games that don't necessarily matter. You know what I'm saying? He's not playing for his high school team or anything like that. So he struggled in the spring, man. Like, if you went and saw him, you'd be like, this dude's not a first rounder. You know what I'm saying? But I also saw him in the summer kill it and hit 3 bombs in one game in Team USA. And you're like, yeah, he is. So, I mean, he ultimately went 9th in the draft. But if you would have watched him in the spring, you'd be like, no way. Like, Caleb Bonmer this year got $3 million from Michigan. If you would have seen him in Michigan this year in the spring, you would have been like, he struggled. He had a hard time getting going. But he killed it in the summer. So you know it's all there. But sometimes they're dealing with factors in the Midwest that others aren't, and a lot of it's weather, getting started. I mean, there was times where you may not play for a week. Like one year, Ryan Bolt years, he was like a high pick guy from Minnesota. He didn't start his first game till May 1st. They got snowed out of April, the whole month. So they played doubleheader every day for 5 days in a row to catch up to the rest of their season. So like that doesn't happen in other places. So you're trying to, like, I always tell, like, my area scouts and stuff, I'm like, she's like, well, I'm going to go to this game. Like, well, what's it look like? Well, it's supposed to be like sleeting rain. So you're going to go see a pitcher in sleeting rain at 30 degrees. You're going to have to go back. So, I mean, you can go, but there's no way you can make a good evaluation on a guy in that kind of condition. He can't even feel his hand. Like, for instance, the day Ashby walked 8 guys, it was 34 degrees. I said, and I think sometimes the people who don't play, the one thing that you have, like, as an advantage is, like, I'd be like, hey, dude, take your gloves off really quick. Can you feel your hands after 2 minutes? That's him. He's out there with no gloves on. We're sitting here going, well, why can't he throw strikes? He can't feel his fingers. Like, he's a human being. So I think, and same thing with the hitters. So, like, you have to give them some more grace in the Midwest because of knowing what their conditions are and what they're up against. So like pitchers, I want to see them early, but I want to follow them all the way to the end because their best starts are going to be at the end. I mean, like Brody Brecht, who ended up being like a late first-round pick last year, he went from football to basketball. He picked up a baseball his senior year in high school, like a week before. He didn't throw one time until a week before his season and then jumped on the mound. And my area guy called, and I went and saw him like, dude, who is this guy? I've never heard his name. And he was like 2 to 5, up to 6, super athletic. And you're like, look like Jeff Samardzija. And you're like, dude, what is this guy? And he's like, yeah, he just picked up a ball last week. And I'm like, he's going to go to Iowa to play football? Like, I'm like, he's not making the right choice. This dude's a monster. And by the end, he was like 98 in high school, like 96. And then he gets to college, he's throwing 100. And you're like, well, that was awesome. I mean, you can't find that in Florida. You can't go watch a guy in June throw 95. You've never heard his name. So like it's all that's what makes this state so awesome. And I think we've had a lot of success in the Midwest recently because of those types of guys. Like we got like Bishop Letson. I mean, I know we didn't draft some of the guys like last year, like Malamade. We drafted him, but we weren't able to sign him. But like, man, like we love those types of guys, and a lot of it's just like sticking with them, like from the beginning on, and knowing like, hey man, if this dude's in Texas, he's going in the first round, second. I mean, like some of these guys don't get overlooked from where they live, so I think just giving that grace period to those kids because they're up against different challenges. Every state has different challenges, but the Midwest, it's the weather matters. Like we've all been up there. It's hard to play when it's 30 degrees. I mean, even in pro ball, I'm just trying to survive April so I can get to a warmer month to get my batting average up. So like, you just don't want to die then. Nobody's hitting 500 in April. So I think you just have to know that. You have to know what they're up against.
Drew, we really appreciate you coming on. I got just one more kind of thing that maybe you can give some advice to, Wisconsin players or just any player in general that's listening to this, the prep players specifically. Like, what advice would you give if they want to play pro ball, no matter what level they're at, level of talent? Touched on some things already, but what would you give as some final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the greatest things I learned was like, you got to excel at everything that doesn't take any talent. So like, it doesn't take talent to work hard. It doesn't take talent to run hard to first base. It doesn't take talent to, warm up properly, play catch properly, be a good teammate, watch the pitcher from when you're in the dugout and kind of plan out and have a plan of attack, mentally be focused and mentally have confidence in yourself. So if you can start with that and then putting in the work is everything. I mean, like if you can train and again, for Vinny's credit, if you can put in the work to prepare for the game, it just gives you that much more of an advantage. And I think the people that are willing to go the extra mile, I didn't play with a lot of guys that made it to the big leagues that weren't willing to do that. Or even in pro ball that weren't willing to do more than everyone else, so I think sometimes you go see these kids. And what I always tell, like even the high school kids around me is like, when I meet with a kid in the house, they break out these folders of like, this is what I'm doing this week. And it's like, this is where I'm working out. This is my workout schedule. This is my throwing routine. These kids are seniors in high school, and you walk out of there like nobody goes in and they're like, I don't know. Like I just show up for the game. Like these kids are putting in work that you can't imagine. For instance, there was a kid, Trey Snyder, that lives right in the neighborhood here where I live. And he signed with the Mets. This dude was on the football team. After football, he was at this place called Pride Fitness. He was hitting every night after football practice. Like you go the extra mile. If that's what you want to do, you have to be able to be willing to put in the work because then the results will come. They're not just you just can't walk out there and expect like, all right, I'm going to be a big leaguer. You have to know, you have to outwork them. And whatever it is that you're good at, you got to just be exceptional at that. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And then also like, it doesn't matter where you're at. If you play, you're going to be found. Like you don't have to worry. You don't have to like worry about going to every single thing, every event you can ever imagine. If you're a good player, people will find you. It doesn't matter where you're at. Like I know people stress about that. Like, well, I'm not going to get a college scholarship if I don't. Like if they get some email or something like, hey, schools are going to find you. You put in the work. Everyone's going to want to be around that type of player because the coaches are watching the second you walk out there. Like I'm watching, if the guy's not warming up properly, he's already turned me off. If he doesn't know how to play catch, he's turned me off. If he doesn't run the base, like I'm not in on that guy. And that's what college coaches want, the same thing. They want winners. They want guys that are make their program better. So the guys, when you walk out and he's doing the things the right way, like even if you don't have as much talent as player B, he's choosing you every single time. And that's the first way to do better. And that doesn't take talent. You know what I'm saying? Like you can be a really good player by just using the ability that you have, by just outworking everybody else.
That's awesome. Well, Drew, thanks so much for coming on. This was
you bet,
enlightening.
Man.
Yeah, this was awesome. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate me having me on.
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks, Drew.
Thank you.
Thanks.
thanks to Drew Anderson for coming on today. That was a fantastic interview. You don't really get to hear from the scouts' perspective that much, or at least I'm not used to hearing that, even someone who engages with this as much as I do. So that was great. One of those episodes that you want to take note of. Write down everything that you can, because there was a lot that I learned from it. I'm sure you guys too, Josh and Vinny, because it was very enlightening. Before we finish, we have a few commits that we want to highlight and congratulate players on, and then, of course, the Rotino report to cap off the episode. From commits within the state, Jake Cummins from Milton committed to UW Milwaukee. He was a future gamer this past year, and he's a Milton high school guy. Ben Johnston committed to UW Eau Claire. Michael Karen committed to Northern Iowa Area Community College. Tyler Vetch committed to Wisconsin Lutheran. Alex Ignacio committed to Queensboro Community College, and Blake Kazar to Wisconsin Lutheran as well. So congratulations to all those players. Obviously, huge accomplishment to make your college commitment. And Vinny, before we go, as I mentioned, the Rotino report, who's today's player that you want to highlight?
Yeah, today we're talking about Bennett Brothel. This kid is an impressive 6'3", 186-pound athlete on the mound, up to 88 that we saw on Twitter on a TrackMan session this fall. We've seen him up to 84 at the Wisconsin State games, but even if it's without the velocity, there is all kinds of ceiling right here with Bennett. Like I said, that frame, that athleticism through the delivery, very repeatable delivery, around a 3/4 slot right there, and just he repeats it, he commands it. He's got very good touch and feel with his fingers with the fastball. He can get it to all 4 quadrants with the fastball, which again is impressive. He's got the makings once that velocity does come, and it will as he continues to fill out, just because of the way that his frame, he stands with that frame with the slope shoulders, the high waist, a lot of things you look for in the frame. You do think and believe that it's going to fill out. Again, seeing the flashes of the velocity already getting up there. He's got a sharp little slider and makings of a changeup as well. So there's a lot of pieces here from Bennett. 129th ranked player in the state currently. Now, this kid is going to pop and going to fly up the rankings right here this spring. Another great example of a kid that started out coming in as a freshman, throwing, 76 in front of us. Then the following year, the velocity, I think it was 72 actually, then 77, high 70s, and then last year was 82, 84 miles per hour, and now all of a sudden you do see him pop with that 88 in the fall. So just a great example of a kid that's come to showcases time after time, and then we see the development. And again, this is a kid his senior year at 2025, Bennett Brothel, that is going to pop this spring.
Yeah, he's part of that talented crop of players over at Hudson in the western part of the state. They were in state this year, and they're college guys throughout that lineup, throughout the pitching rotation. A lot of talent over on the western part of the state. That's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks to everyone for joining us, whether you're on YouTube, on Apple, on Spotify. Throw us a subscribe or a follow wherever you find our podcast. We appreciate any feedback. Leave us a review or a comment on YouTube. We like hearing from you. And follow us at Prep Baseball WI on X or go to our website at prepbaseballreport.com/Wisconsin for the latest on our showcases, news, features, everything you can find right there. So again, thanks for joining us, and as always, we'll leave you with this. Let's bring back Badger baseball.